What's up, guys? Before we get into the video today, I just want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Thrive Fantasy. Come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports app for player props. All you have to do is choose 10 out of the 20 player prop options to build your lineup. Use promo code HIVE, that is HIVE, when you sign up today, and you will receive an instant $20 bonus on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or the Play Store, or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and prop up today. What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. My name is Zach Hernandez, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Matt Llewellyn. And today we're going to be talking about the 49ers 53-man roster and also the practice squad. Matt, first things first, what stood out to you the most?
How thin they are at corner. They kept 5 on the roster, including perennially injured Jason Verrett, who has looked really good, but then again had like a grade 1 hamstring issue like late in the camp. So, you've seen last year's I believe the 5th or 6th round pick, Tim Harris, got put onto waivers, and it's just at some point it's a very thin room, I think. And they're a Jason Verrett injury away from calling up Dante Johnson or bringing Tim Harris back. So they do have options, but you got Richard Sherman, who's not getting any younger. You got Ahkello Witherspoon, who is super inconsistent. And then you have Emmanuel Mosley, who, with some tape on him, let's see if he grows or not. We don't know enough. And I just think that, the room is just a little bit empty, if you will. And, any key injury, especially when you're talking about early season games when they're trying to build up all these calluses and, take hits and put hits on people. And, you never know if somebody's going to go down. And, I thought it was a little bit of a missed opportunity that they didn't go out and sign someone like Logan Ryan, who was on the free agent market for forever and a day. He only got signed a few days ago. So, there were things they could have done. It's not for me to, second guess the team, but if there's one surprising area, it's the choices that they made in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how they continuously addressed their wide receiver position throughout the offseason, even if it was just camp bodies, but they really didn't seem to care to add any defensive backs. They did add Cyprien as a safety, but as far as the corner position, like you just addressed, they kind of felt comfortable apparently standing pat on where they were. And then that report came out from Matt Barrows that they were looking into trading Ahkello, and then John Lynch came out and said that's not true. So there's just a lot that's up in the air with the 49ers secondary. But for me, I think what stood out the most, two things. Number one, which we all knew, they're going into the year again, with 3 quarterbacks yet again, which isn't really common. It might be more of a common thing this year because of COVID. But normally that's not really a thing. But Kyle Shanahan just has that love for CJ that he just can't let him go. And number two, go ahead. Do you have to say something?
Yeah, it's a weird thing too, because it's like CJ's not even second on the depth chart. Like if something, heaven forbid, if Jimmy's not out there, then it's going to be Nick Mullins, and then you kind of, it's not even like CJ goes out there and holds kicks. Like he literally just does nothing. I don't know. I mean, maybe he hands out Gatorade to the players, the real players. I mean, at this point, he's a glorified, equipment manager. So, yeah, I don't get it. And, I know the COVID's a thing, but a lot of the other teams around the league are only carrying 2 quarterbacks. So, it's a little bit of a mystery to me why they chose to keep 3. Especially when we know what CJ Beathard is at this point, and he's not it.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. He's got some sort of commitment to him. And obviously this is completely separate from CJ as a person. We're just speaking strictly as a football player. Right. It doesn't make sense to keep him on the roster. That spot could have gone to somebody like a Jonathan Cyprien, a veteran, a guy who could bring some, much needed leadership and knowledge to the 49ers secondary. But also another thing that stood out to me, I thought was the wide receiver position. After all that fuss of signing veteran after veteran after veteran, although they may have just been camp bodies, they went with the 6 guys that we all thought they were going to go with. Ayuk, the rookie, Kendrick Bourne, Richie James, Dante Pettis, Deebo Samuel, and Trent Taylor. I think the only surprise, quote unquote, would be Richie James, because there was a lot of speculation that his roster spot was up in the air and a younger guy or a veteran could come in and take it from him. But that didn't really seem to happen. So there aren't too many changes other than the addition of Ayuk to this 49ers wide receiver group. So they must feel comfortable going into it. I know Lynch recently said, that they are very comfortable at the depth they have at the position, despite the recent injuries. So look, they're really banking on Debo coming back healthy and this not being a serious injury for the rookie Brandon Ayuk. Because if those two things don't pan out quite like they're hoping or that they're planning on, they could have some issue on their starting wide receivers. That's something to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as Richie James go, I think it turned into a situation where the devil is better than the devil you don't, and that he's familiar with the system. And rather than bringing in a new guy who you maybe get marginally better production out of, as far as maybe kick returns or something like that, they'd have to learn the system, which kind of just makes that a wash. If you get better production on somebody who doesn't know the system, I mean, as far as the other guys, I mean, it's, Trent Taylor with the rest of this offense, it's going to look interesting. Everybody says that Dante Pettis has a bug up his ass this year and, he's looking better. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously, Ayuk is going to be extremely intriguing just from that Shanahan said that he thought he was the best wide receiver in the draft. So coming from Shanahan, that's saying something, and that kind of makes me excited for, what they're going to trot out for him as far as scheme wise. Debo, again, we're going to find out soon here whether or not he's going to be back for week 1. My guess is probably not, maybe, an extra week or two. But if they get him out there, then, that's again, another guy. And then Kendrick Bourne working hard in the offseason. It's an interesting group, that's for sure. And it is kind of a little bit of a surprise that they went with the stock guys, because it seemed like they tried to sign these guys. They drafted Juwan Jennings, who ended up getting cut. You see them making all these moves, and it's just the same core guys that they had. I think that the group looks different because of more experience. And again, you're getting a guy like Taylor back from injury. So that'll be really interesting. The last area, though, and this kind of coincides with the wide receivers, is that they're carrying 4 tight ends, which is pretty interesting. So, I mean, Kittle obviously is a given. Jordan Reed, you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Maybe he gets hurt or something. But then you have Ross Dwelly, who came up in big spots last year, and then they drafted Charlie Warner this year. So they're investing heavily in the tight end spot. I think that's a good move. I really think that Shanahan's offense does a great job of, when you're passing between the numbers, you're opening up the edge for the running that Kyle likes to do. And I saw somebody on Twitter say that, it was sad that the 49ers only had XYZ amount of broken tackles or whatever. But it's like when Mostert and last year Breida, when you're running by everybody and you're not getting tackled, broken tackles don't really mean a lot. They were number 2 in the NFL in rushing. But I think a lot of that goes to the fact that the 49ers do a lot of damage in the passing game in between the numbers, which again sucks a lot of those defenders inside, so that way they can run to the outside. So they kind of complement each other. And I think that carrying 4 tight ends, especially tight ends that can block, are mean and nasty, and still have the ability to get out in space and work with the ball, I think that's critical for the offense.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because that was going to be my next question is, what did you think of them carrying 4 tight ends? George Kittle seems to be ecstatic about it. He was saying, he wants to see them run a lot of sets with multiple tight ends out there. And people are already hyping this setup as a great a unit that has great potential. Mm-hmm. Jordan Reed and George Kittle, 2 very, very talented tight ends. Obviously, we all know Jordan Reed's injury history. There's a big asterisk on him as to if he pans out for the 49ers. But there's a big risk reward there for them. And I think the reward is much greater than the risk, because if it doesn't work out, hey, all right, you tried. Let's see what the young guy, Charlie Warner, or even Ross Dwelly, we already kind of know what we have in him. So it's not too big of a drop off from Reed to a guy like Dwelly or Warner. But if it pans out, then the 49ers are looking at a very, very dynamic duo of tight ends, which reminds me of Vernon Davis and Delaney Walker, where it's just, pick your poison type with both of these guys. And, I was reading reports saying that Jordan Reed was pretty much unstoppable when he was practicing with the 49ers. I know it took him a while to actually get to start practicing, but once he did, he was beating double teams. He was, fighting through physical contact, whatever it needed to be done to catch the ball. So I'm actually really excited to see what he can bring. So last question for you, Matt. Solomon Thomas moved inside. How is that going to pan out for the 49ers defensive line?
He'll be a rotation guy. We know what Solomon Thomas is, and listen, he can say I'm in the best. They always say they're in the best shape of their life. He's added weight. He's doing this and that. He earned his money inside. I got to see it to believe it at this point. That Solomon Thomas has been such an underachiever and a disappointment for where he was picked. That at this point, expectations are so low that if he does anything other than screw the pooch, I'll be surprised. And I'm not, that's not. I'm sure Solomon's a nice guy, but I didn't like the pick when he came out. I thought his hands were small and he had a hard time finishing, and that's proved true in the NFL. He doesn't finish plays. People get away from him, and it's not that he's, not a hard worker. I'm sure he is a really hard worker. It's just sometimes there's a big difference between Pac-12 football and the NFL, and that's just at this point we know what he is, and if he can be a rotational contributor, then so be it. Honestly, for me, I'm more excited about Kentavious Street. That somebody like that. So, somebody who wasn't a first round pick, but who is looking like a beast, so that to me is the more interesting aspect of it. Solomon Thomas, I'm pretty sure this is going to be his last season in San Francisco.
Wow. All right. Yeah. Baby Hulk there in Kentavious Street. Yeah, it's unfortunate when a guy drafted as high as Solly was, we're talking about lofty aspirations as a rotational player. I think that kind of speaks to how it panned out for the 49ers. They had that Stanford class together though, Matt. So, you got to love it. I think that's going to do it for us.
Nepotism at its finest.
Yes. I think it's going to do it for us today, guys. I want to thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. If you like what you see, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below. What do you think of the 49ers 53-man roster? And also make sure you hit the like button on this video.
Go ahead and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss a beat. And as always, go Niners.